I stood on the platform at Grand Central Station, 17 years old, watching my mother's Mercedes disappear into the tunnel. My suitcase, the cheap one they'd bought me from Target, not the matching Louis Vuitton set they'd gotten Claire for her graduation, sat at my feet. In my pocket was exactly $200 and a one-way ticket to nowhere they knew about. The thing was, they thought I was going to state college upstate. Community college, really, the kind of place they'd convinced me was more my speed. They'd driven me here, unloaded my single bag, and left without so much as a hug. Mom had checked her watch 3 times in the 5 minutes we stood there. Claire had a spa appointment at 3, apparently, and Mom needed to drop Dad at the golf club first. "You have our number if you need anything," Mom had said, not meeting my eyes. "Though you should really try to be independent now. You're an adult." Adult. Right. The kind of adult whose college fund had been redirected to pay for Claire's semester abroad in Paris. The kind of adult who'd been sleeping in the converted storage room while Claire got the master bedroom with the ensuite bath. The kind of adult who'd worked 2 jobs through high school to buy her own prom dress because there just wasn't room in the budget. I watched their car disappear, and I smiled. Because this wasn't the first time I'd stood on this platform. This wasn't the first time I'd watched them leave me behind like yesterday's trash. In my first life, I'd gotten on that train. I'd gone to that community college, worked 3 jobs to stay afloat, and graduated with honors that no one from my family attended the ceremony to see. I'd struggled for years, always one step behind, always trying to prove myself to parents who never looked my way. I died at 35, exhausted and alone, in a studio apartment I could barely afford from an undiagnosed heart condition that I'd ignored because I couldn't afford to miss work. The last thing I'd thought before everything went dark was that I wished I could do it all over again. Someone had been listening. I'd woken up on my 10th birthday, gasping in my narrow bed in the storage room with 15 years of memories that hadn't happened yet. At first, I thought it was a dream, but the memories were too vivid, too specific. I knew what Claire would say at breakfast before she said it. I knew that Dad would forget my birthday until Mom reminded him at dinner. I knew that in 3 weeks, I'd overhear them discussing whether to cancel my piano lessons to afford Claire's equestrian camp. It took me 2 weeks to accept that somehow, impossibly, I'd been given a second chance. And I'd spent the last 7 years planning exactly how to use it. The first thing I'd done was stop trying to win their love. In my first life, I'd bent myself into knots trying to be good enough, smart enough, useful enough to matter to them. I'd swallowed every cruel word, every forgotten birthday, every time they chose Claire over me, thinking that if I just tried harder, they'd finally see me. This time, I knew better. You can't make someone love you, especially when they've decided you're not worth it. My parents had made their choice long ago. Claire was their golden child, the daughter they paraded in front of their friends. I was the accident that had trapped them in a marriage neither of them really wanted anymore. The reminder of when Dad was still working his way up, and they couldn't afford the life they had now. So I stopped trying to be part of their family. Instead, I started planning my exit. The second thing I'd done was reach out to the one person they'd tried to make me forget. My grandmother, my father's mother, the woman they'd cut out of our lives when I was 9 because she'd had the audacity to call them out on their treatment of me at a family dinner. In my first life, I'd been too young and too successfully manipulated to understand what had really happened. They'd told me Grandma Rose was sick, that she needed to focus on her health, that it was better if we didn't bother her. By the time I was old enough to question it, I'd lost her address, her phone number, everything. She'd died when I was 23, and I'd only found out months later from an obituary I'd stumbled across online. This time, I'd kept every scrap of information I could find. And on my 16th birthday, alone in the house as usual, while they took Claire to a Michelin star restaurant, I'd found her number and made the call. "Hello?" Her voice had been exactly as I remembered, warm and strong. "Grandma Rose?" My voice had cracked. It's Vanessa." The silence on the other end had stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "Vanessa? My little Nessa?" Her voice turned fierce. "Where are you? Are you safe? Do they know you're calling me?" We talked for 3 hours that night. I told her everything. Well, not the rebirth part, but everything else. The years of neglect, the way they treated Claire versus how they treated me, the college fund that had vanished. She'd cried. I'd cried. And when we hung up, I had something I'd never had before: an ally. Over the next year and a half we'd planned, Grandma Rose, it turned out, was far wealthier than my parents had ever let on. Dad's father had been a real estate mogul in the 50s and 60s, and while he died when Dad was young, Grandma Rose had managed the portfolio brilliantly for decades. She was worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 million. Money my father had assumed he'd inherit, money he'd been counting on to fund his early retirement, and the vacation home in Tuscany he'd already put a deposit on. He cut me off when I criticized his parenting, Grandma Rose had told me during one of our secret phone calls. Told me I was a bitter old woman who didn't understand modern family dynamics. As if there's anything modern about scapegoating a child. Her voice had turned sharp. I told him then that I'd change my will. He didn't believe me. He's been waiting for me to die for 8 years now, assuming his groveling sister got everything. But she didn't. No, darling. I left everything in a trust. I was going to give it to charity, spite the whole lot of them. She paused. But now I think I have a better idea. The trust had been modified on my 17th birthday. Not that my parents knew. They thought I was exactly where they had always wanted me, safely out of the way at a nothing college, on a path to a nothing life that would never eclipse their precious Claire's shine. They had no idea I'd been accepted to Thornton College, one of the most prestigious private institutions in the country, with a full academic scholarship I'd earned through online advanced placement courses they didn't know I'd been taking. They didn't know that Grandma Rose had set up an account in my name with enough money to live comfortably while I studied. They didn't know that I'd been in contact with her lawyers, setting up everything I'd need for a life they couldn't touch. All they knew was that I was getting on a train to a community college 7 hours away. I picked up my cheap suitcase and walked, not to the platform they expected, but to the taxi stand outside. The driver loaded my bag and I gave him an address in Greenwich Village that my parents had never heard. My real apartment. The one Grandma Rose had helped me lease. 1 bedroom, small but beautiful, with tall windows and original hardwood floors. It would be my home base while I attended Thornton, a short subway ride away. As the taxi merged into traffic, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Hope you get settled okay. Remember to focus on your studies and not on distractions. I didn't respond. There was no point. In their minds, I was already gone, already filed away under handled in whatever mental spreadsheet they used to organize their lives. They had no idea that I was just getting started. The first semester at Thornton passed in a blur of classes, networking, and careful reputation building. I kept my head down and my grades up. I joined the investment club and the entrepreneurship society. I made friends with people whose families actually had dinner together, who called their parents for advice instead of silence. I didn't tell anyone my last name at first. Thornton was full of legacy students whose parents had walls full of degrees from the school, and while my father had gone there, something he'd mentioned exactly once when he was drunk and bitter about his own squandered potential, I didn't want the connection. I was building something new, something that had nothing to do with the family that had abandoned me. My phone sat silent. No calls from home asking how I was settling in. No texts checking if I needed anything. It had been 8 weeks, and the only message I'd received was a forwarded email from Claire about her engagement party. Family only, the invitation said. I wasn't on the guest list. It stung less than I'd expected, or maybe I just built up better defenses this time around. You okay? My roommate, Mud Jessica, found me staring at my phone. You've got that look again. What look? The one that says you're thinking about people who don't deserve the mental real estate. Jessica had a way of cutting straight to the heart of things. Let me guess. Family? Former family, I corrected. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. That was the thing about Thornton. Everyone came from money, but not everyone came from happiness. We recognized our own. In November, Grandma Rose invited me to Thanksgiving at her estate in Connecticut. I took the train up and found myself in a house that felt more like home in 5 minutes than my parents' place ever had. She'd invited a dozen people, her book club friends, her neighbors, a few cousins from her side of the family that I'd never been allowed to meet. "Where's Vanessa been hiding?" one of the cousins, Marcus, asked. "I haven't seen her since she was tiny." "Her father decided I was a bad influence," Grandma Rose said crisply. "But Nessa's 18 now and makes her own choices." Over dinner, surrounded by laughter and warmth and actual conversation, I felt something loosen in my chest. This was what family was supposed to feel like. "Your father called me last week," Grandma Rose said later, when it was just the two of us in her study. First time in 8 years. What did he want? Money, what else? Apparently his vacation home deal fell through and he needs a bridge loan. She sipped her wine. I told him I'd given all my spare capital to charity. Did he believe you? He's desperate enough to want to. Her eyes glinted. I may have also mentioned that I'd recently taken a trip to New York to meet with my estate lawyers. Made sure he knew they were updating the trust documentation. Evil, I said admiringly. I learned from the best, darling. Your grandfather never did business with anyone foolish enough to show all their cards at once. By Christmas, my parents still hadn't called. I spent the holiday with Grandma Rose again and ignored the single text from my mother. Hope you're having a good break. Claire's engagement party is next month. We'll be busy. No invitation extended. Not even a pretense that I was welcome. January brought Claire's engagement party at the country club. I knew about it from the photos flooding social media. Claire in designer clothes, mom in pearls, dad in his best suit, all of them beaming for the camera. The caption on Claire's Instagram, "Surrounded by the people who matter most, so blessed to have such an amazing family." I didn't rate a tag. I didn't even rate a mention. But that was fine because while they were popping champagne and celebrating Claire's upcoming wedding to Bradley Whitmore III, old money, trust fund, exactly the kind of son-in-law my parents had always wanted, I was in a meeting with Grandma Rose's lawyers setting up the final pieces of my own future. "You're sure about this?" Richard Chen, the senior partner, asked me. "Once we file this documentation, there's no going back." "I'm sure." Grandma Rose squeezed my hand. "Then let's make it official." The documents were signed. The trust was activated. And just like that, I went from a girl with nothing to a woman with everything I'd need to build the life I wanted. Not that my parents would know. Not yet. The call came in March, during finals week of my freshman year. "Vanessa?" Mom's voice sounded strange, tight. "We need to talk." It was the first time she'd called me in 8 months. "I'm kind of busy," I said, not looking up from my corporate finance textbook. "Finals." "This is important." A pause. "Your father's mother passed away last night." I'd known it was coming. Grandma Rose had told me 3 weeks ago that the cancer had metastasized, that the doctors were giving her maybe a month. We'd spent every weekend together since then, talking and laughing and making sure every detail was in place. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. "Are you there?" Mom's voice sharpened with impatience. "Yeah," I managed. "I'm here." "The funeral is Friday. You should probably come." Not "we'd like you there" or "we've missed you" or even "are you okay?" Just a clinical statement of expectation. "I'll be there," I said, and hung up. I let myself cry then, deep, racking sobs that shook my whole body. Jessica held me without asking questions, and when I finally pulled myself together, she asked what I needed. "A black dress," I said, "and maybe some courage." Friday dawned gray and cold. The funeral was at a church in Connecticut, the one Grandma Rose had attended for 40 years. I drove up in the car I'd bought with money from the trust, nothing flashy, just a reliable Honda, and arrived early enough to sit in the back and watch the other mourners arrive. My father came in looking gray himself, older than I remembered. My mother was beside him in elegant black, and Claire followed in a dress that probably cost more than my first semester textbooks. They took their seats in the front row, the position of honor reserved for close family. I stayed in the back. The service was beautiful. Person after person stood up to talk about Grandma Rose's generosity, her fierce intelligence, her loyalty to those she loved. Marcus gave a eulogy that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. My father didn't speak. He just sat there, stiff and uncomfortable, like he was fulfilling an obligation he'd rather avoid. After the service, there was a reception at Grandma Rose's estate. It had been in her instructions. No sad graveside gathering, but a party to celebrate her life. The house was filled with flowers and food and people telling stories. I was standing by the window, holding a glass of wine I wasn't drinking, when my father finally noticed me. "Vanessa?" He looked genuinely startled. "What are you doing here?" "Paying my respects," I said evenly. "But how did you even know? I didn't think you'd been in contact with Mother." Before I could answer, Richard Chen appeared at my elbow. "Ms. Morrison, if you have a moment, we need to handle some documentation. You're mentioned in the will." My father's face went through several interesting expressions. "Mentioned in the will? That's... Mother wouldn't..." "If you'll excuse us," Richard said smoothly and guided me toward the study. Behind us, I heard my mother's sharp whisper. "What does that mean? She's in the will." The study was full of people I'd come to know over the past year. Grandma Rose's friends, Marcus and the other cousins, her longtime housekeeper, Maria. Richard stood at the front with Grandma Rose's will in hand. "Before we begin the formal reading," he said, "Rose wanted me to play a video message. She recorded it last month." The screen on the wall lit up, and there was Grandma Rose, sitting in her favorite chair in this very room, looking frail but fierce. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," she said, her voice clear and strong. "And I imagine some of you are very curious about what I've done with my money." She smiled, that sharp-edged smile I'd come to love. "So let me be clear. To my son, James Morrison, I leave the sum of $1. You cut me out of your life and your daughter's life because I dared to call you out on your cruelty. You've spent the last 8 years assuming you'd inherit everything, that my anger would fade. It didn't. You made your choice. Now live with it. To my granddaughter, Claire Morrison, I leave nothing. You've had every advantage in life handed to you on a silver platter. You don't need my help, and frankly, you never bothered to visit me except when your parents dragged you here as a child. You won't miss what you never valued. To my granddaughter, Vanessa Morrison, I leave everything. The house, the portfolio, the stocks, the bonds, all of it. You'll find that the trust we established has been fully funded and control transfers to you immediately. You're also now the majority shareholder in Morrison Real Estate Holdings, the company my late husband built and that currently employs your father as CEO. The room erupted. I could hear shouting from the hallway, my father's voice, my mother's, both of them demanding to know what was happening. On screen, Grandma Rose kept talking. "Nessa, my darling girl, you've been dealt an unfair hand from birth. Your parents' neglect, their favoritism, the way they made you feel invisible, none of that was your fault. You deserved better, and now you have the means to build the life you should have had all along. As for the rest of you here in this room, my friends, my true family, thank you for the years of love and laughter. Marcus, the cottage in Maine, is yours, as promised. Maria, you'll find a generous pension waiting. The rest of you will find envelopes with your names on them. I've made sure everyone who mattered to me is taken care of. To those who didn't make the cut, I hope you learned something from this. Love isn't transactional, family isn't a convenience, and cruelty, even the polite, civilized kind, has consequences." The screen went dark. The study door burst open. My father stood there, his face purple with rage. "This is fraud. She was coerced. Vanessa manipulated a dying old woman." "Actually," Richard said calmly, "Rose was of completely sound mind when she modified her will. We have 3 doctors' assessments confirming it. We also have documentation going back 18 months showing her intentions were clear and consistent. This will is ironclad." 18 months? My mother looked at me with dawning horror. "You've been in contact with her for 18 months? "Longer," I said quietly. "Almost 2 years." "You little snake." Claire pushed past our parents. "You knew she had money and you manipulated her into cutting us out." "I didn't manipulate anyone." My voice stayed level. "I called my grandmother because I wanted to know her. Because you all tried to erase her from my life and I was tired of losing people to your egos." "She's our mother," Dad spat. "Our family. You had no right." "No right?" Something snapped inside me. No right! You left me at a train station 8 months ago with $200 and a ticket to a community college. You didn't call, didn't text, didn't check if I was alive or dead. Claire's engagement party was family only, but I didn't rate an invitation. You've treated me like garbage my entire life, and now you're mad that I found someone who actually loved me? We gave you everything, Mom started. You gave me nothing. I was shaking now. You gave Claire everything. The college fund, the bedroom, the clothes, the attention, the love. I worked 2 jobs in high school to buy my own prom dress. I slept in a converted storage room. You directed my college money to pay for Claire's Paris trip. And when I turned 18, you dumped me at a train station and never looked back. That's not, we were teaching you independence. You were getting rid of me. I looked at my father, this man who'd never once told me he was proud of me, who'd forgotten more birthdays than he'd remembered. Grandma Rose didn't leave you anything because you didn't deserve anything. And honestly, after 8 months of silence, you don't deserve the courtesy of this conversation either. I turned to Richard. I assume there's more documentation to handle? Yes, but it can wait until they've left. They? My father's voice rose. This is my mother's house. It's Miss Morrison's house, Richard corrected. And she can ask you to leave. I looked at my parents, at Claire with her designer dress and her engagement ring and her perfect life built on the sacrifice of mine. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn their love, all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering what was wrong with me. Get out, I said. They didn't move. Get out! The words tore out of me. Get out of my house and get out of my life. You made it clear I was never part of your family. Fine. You don't get to change your mind now that there's money involved. Security, Richard had wisely arranged for security, appeared in the doorway. My parents left, hurling threats about lawyers and lawsuits and how this wasn't over. But it was. It was so completely over. When they were gone, I sank into Grandma Rose's chair and let myself fall apart. Marcus sat with me and Maria brought tea, and Richard quietly explained that everything was in order, that the will was unbreakable, that my parents could sue, but they'd lose. She wanted you to have this, Maria said, handing me a letter in Grandma Rose's handwriting. I opened it with shaking hands. My dearest Nessa, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I imagine the last hour has been quite dramatic. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to see your father's face, but I hope it was everything I imagined. You asked me once why I didn't fight harder to stay in your life after James cut me off. The truth is, I was a coward. I told myself you were better off without the conflict, that maybe if I gave him space, he'd come around. By the time I realized I'd made a mistake, I thought too much time had passed. I thought you'd hate me for abandoning you. And then you called. My brave, brilliant girl called me on your 16th birthday, and I got a second chance I didn't deserve. These 2 years with you have been the happiest of my life since your grandfather died. Watching you grow into this fierce, intelligent, kind woman, knowing that you survived your parents' neglect and came out the other side with your heart intact, has been my greatest joy. The money is just money, darling. You'd have made your way without it. I have no doubt about that. But why should you have to struggle when I have the means to help? Why should you start from zero when I can give you a foundation to build on? Use it wisely. Use it to build the life you deserve. And please, please don't let their cruelty make you cruel in turn. You have every right to your anger. I certainly hope you enjoy watching them squirm, but don't let it consume you. Be happy. Fall in love. Make art or solve equations or build businesses or whatever sets your soul on fire. And know that I loved you. I loved you when you were a baby, and I held you for the first time. I loved you through all the years we were apart, even when I didn't have the courage to fight for you. And I love you now wherever I am. Build something beautiful, my darling girl. You've earned it. All my love, Grandma Rose. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face, and then I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. What happens now? Marcus asked gently. I looked around the study at the built-in bookshelves and the antique desk and the paintings Grandma Rose had collected over decades. I thought about the trust fund, about the real estate portfolio, about the fact that I now owned the company my father had spent 20 years climbing the ladder at. And I thought about the life I was going to build. Not to spite them, though, that would be a lovely bonus. But for me, for Grandma Rose, for every version of myself that had suffered and survived. Now, I smiled through my tears. Now I get to work. The lawsuits came, exactly as predicted. My parents sued for undue influence, for elder abuse, for anything their lawyers could think of. Every single case was dismissed. The documentation was too thorough, the witnesses too numerous, the evidence of their neglect too damning. Their lawyer actually apologized to me after the final dismissal. For what it's worth, he said, I wouldn't have taken the case if I'd known the full situation. What they did to you, he shook his head. I'm sorry. Meanwhile, I went back to Thornton for my sophomore year. But now, instead of hiding my last name, I owned it. Morrison, the name on buildings around campus, the name on the scholarship fund I'd quietly established for students from difficult family situations. I kept my grades up and my profile higher. I dated a brilliant economics major named David, who actually wanted to hear about my day. I joined boards and committees and started learning how to manage wealth, not just have it. And I went to the office. Morrison Real Estate Holdings was headquartered in a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. My father had been CEO for 5 years, ever since the previous CEO retired. He'd been coasting on the company's reputation and my grandfather's foundation, making safe bets and decent profits. But I was the majority shareholder now, which meant I had the power to make changes. I scheduled a board meeting for October, a month into the fall semester. I took the train down from Thornton in my best suit, my hair pulled back, my grandmother's pearl earrings in my ears. The receptionist didn't recognize me. Why would she? I was just another college kid in business casual. I'm here for the board meeting, I said. Name? Vanessa Morrison. Her eyes went wide. Oh, Ms. Morrison, of course they're expecting you. Conference room A, top floor. The elevator ride up felt like rising through layers of my past. How many times had I imagined working in a building like this? How many nights had I dreamed of being someone who mattered? The conference room was full of men in expensive suits and 2 women who looked like they'd fought hard for their seats at the table. My father sat at the head, looking confident and comfortable, until he saw me. What is she doing here? He demanded. Ms. Morrison holds 52% of company shares, Richard Chen said, mildly. He'd agreed to represent me at the meeting. She has every right to be here. More right than anyone, actually. I took a seat, not at the head of the table, but in the middle, where I could see everyone. Shall we begin? I said. The meeting was a masterclass in corporate awkwardness. We went through the quarterly reports, discussed ongoing projects, reviewed profit margins. My father kept trying to control the conversation, kept trying to minimize my presence. And then we got to new business. I'd like to propose a change in leadership, I said calmly. Effective immediately, I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in our current CEO. The room erupted. My father shot to his feet. You can't. This is absurd. I've been running this company for 5 years. Into comfortable mediocrity, I said. Grandpa built this company by taking smart risks and innovating. You've been playing it safe and watching our market share slowly erode. We're profitable, sure, but we're stagnant. I pulled out a presentation I'd spent weeks preparing with help from my professors at Thornton and some consultants Richard had recommended. These are our numbers compared to our top 5 competitors. This is where we're losing ground. And these are my proposals for new directions. I'd done my homework. I'd identified 3 emerging markets where Morrison Real Estate could expand. I'd found properties we'd overlooked, deals we'd walked away from that we shouldn't have. I'd built a 5-year growth plan that was aggressive but achievable. The board members leaned forward, interested despite themselves. Who exactly would you propose as CEO? One of the older board members asked. If not James? For now, I'd suggest an interim CEO from outside the family while we conduct a proper search. Someone with experience in growth stage real estate development. I named a woman I'd researched, a former CEO who'd taken early retirement, but might be interested in an interim role. I've already reached out to her. She's interested. This is a coup, my father hissed. This is a child playing with things she doesn't understand. I'm a child? I looked at him directly for the first time. I'm 19 years old, attending one of the best colleges in the country with a 4.0 GPA. I've spent the last year learning everything I can about this company and this industry. I've read every quarterly report going back 10 years. I've studied every deal you've made and every deal you've passed on. I stood up, placing my hands on the table. But you're right, I'm young and I don't have decades of experience. That's why I'm not proposing myself as CEO. I'm proposing better leadership and a clear path forward. If the board wants to keep you in your position despite the stagnation, that's your choice. But I'm the majority shareholder and I'm making it clear that I expect better. The vote was 8-3 in favor of my proposal. My father was out as CEO, effective in 30 days. He left the meeting without looking at me. I heard later that he tried to line up positions at competitors, but word had gotten around. The Morrison girl ousted him, was the story making the rounds. Companies didn't want to hire someone who'd lost a power struggle with his teenage daughter. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. But the next morning, when I woke up in my apartment in the village, I felt something else. Free. Claire's wedding was in December, a Christmas-themed extravaganza at the same country club where they'd held her engagement party. I knew about it because the invitations were posted all over social media. The actual paper invitation never materialized in my mailbox. I didn't go, obviously. I spent that weekend with David's family in Boston, experiencing what it was like to be around people who actually enjoyed each other's company. His mother asked me about my classes. His father wanted to hear about my work with the real estate company. His little sister asked me to help her with her math homework. Your family's nice, I told David that night. They're yours too if you want them to be, he said and kissed me. On Monday, my phone exploded with messages. Not from my family, I'd blocked their numbers months ago, but from friends, from acquaintances, from people I barely knew. Did you see Claire's wedding? Oh my God, the drama. Your sister is melting down on Instagram. I opened Instagram reluctantly. Claire's account, which had been picture perfect for years, was now a disaster. The wedding photos showed a beautiful venue, a gorgeous dress, all the right details. But the comments told another story. Apparently, Bradley Whitmore III had been arrested at the reception. Fraud charges, embezzlement. His trust fund, it turned out, wasn't a trust fund at all. He'd been stealing from his family's company for years to maintain his lifestyle. The feds had been building a case for months, and they'd chosen the wedding day to make their move. Claire's new husband had been led away in handcuffs before they'd even cut the cake. The society pages were having a field day. Whitmore heir arrested at own wedding. Holiday nuptials turned to nightmare. Fraud charges rock society wedding. And Claire, my perfect golden child sister, was at the center of a scandal she couldn't spin or escape. I should have felt triumphant. This was karma at its finest, wasn't it? The family that had dumped me was imploding spectacularly. But mostly I just felt hollow. Until I saw my mother's Facebook post public for the first time in years. In times of crisis, we learn who our real family is. So grateful for our daughter Claire and everyone who has supported us. Some people turn their backs on family when times get hard, but we know what loyalty means. The subtext was clear. I was the villain in their story, the ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned them and stolen their inheritance and refused to help when they needed it. Never mind that they'd abandoned me first. Never mind that they hadn't spoken to me in over a year except through lawyers. Never mind that every piece of suffering they were experiencing was a direct result of their own choices. I was the bad guy because I'd stopped playing the victim. I stared at the post for a long time, and then I did something I'd been avoiding. I wrote my own. I've stayed quiet for a long time about my family. I didn't want to air private pain in public, and I genuinely hoped that distance would let old wounds heal. But I've been watching the narrative being spun, and I can't stay silent anymore. I'm Vanessa Morrison. I'm 19 years old. I'm a sophomore at Thornton College, and I'm the daughter that my family erased. I'm not going to go into every detail of my childhood. That's between me and my therapist. But here are some facts. I spent my teenage years sleeping in a converted storage room while my sister had the master suite. My college fund was redirected to pay for my sister's lifestyle. I worked 2 jobs through high school while my sister got an allowance that would have covered my rent. When I graduated high school, my family drove me to a train station, gave me $200, and didn't contact me for 8 months. I wasn't at my sister's engagement party because I wasn't invited. I didn't attend her wedding for the same reason. The narrative that I turned my back on family is fascinating, considering they literally left me at a train station and never looked back. My grandmother, Rose Morrison, knew all of this. She'd been cut out of my life when I was 9 because she dared to criticize my parents' favoritism. When I reconnected with her at 16, she gave me something my parents never had: unconditional love. She left me her estate, not to spite my father, though I won't pretend that wasn't a factor, but because she wanted me to have the foundation I deserved, the start in life that had been denied to me. I'm not sorry for accepting her gift. I'm not sorry for protecting myself. And I'm not sorry for building a life away from people who made it clear I was never welcome in theirs. To everyone who's reached out with support over the past year, thank you. To everyone who's judging me based on my family's selective version of events, I understand. Family is complicated, and it's easier to believe that there are 2 sides to every story than to accept that sometimes people are just cruel. But I'm done being the scapegoat. I'm done being the acceptable loss in their narrative. And I'm especially done being blamed for refusing to set myself on fire to keep them warm. I hope my sister's situation resolves itself. I genuinely do. But I'm not going to be guilted into playing the supportive family member after years of being treated like I didn't exist. I'm building my own life now, and it's a good one. I hit post before I could second-guess myself. The response was instant and overwhelming. Hundreds of comments, thousands of shares. Some people called me brave, some called me ungrateful. Most just said, "I'm sorry that happened to you." My parents predictably lost their minds. They threatened to sue for defamation. Their lawyer sent a cease and desist letter that Richard batted away with ease. "Truth is an absolute defense," he said calmly. But the real impact was quieter. People who'd known my family growing up started reaching out. Old neighbors, my parents' former friends, even some of Claire's high school classmates. "I always wondered why you seemed so different from the rest of them," one message said. "Now I understand." "I remember your mom forgot you at soccer practice once," another said. "Maya, you were waiting for 2 hours before the coach drove you home. She said she'd just gotten busy with Claire's recital. You were 9. Your dad told my parents once that you were the practice kid and Claire was the one they got right. I thought he was joking. I'm so sorry." The messages built a picture I'd lived but never seen from the outside. Confirmation that I hadn't imagined it, hadn't exaggerated it. That the neglect had been real and visible and documented in 1,000 small ways by people who'd witnessed it and done nothing. It hurt. But it also helped. By the spring of my sophomore year, the dust had settled. Bradley's trial was ongoing. He was looking at serious prison time. Claire had moved back in with our parents, her influencer career in tatters, her perfect life shattered. My father had taken a mid-level position at a smaller firm for half his previous salary. My mother had gone back to work for the first time in 20 years, managing a boutique that one of her friends owned. They'd had to sell the house. The big, beautiful house with the master suite that Claire had occupied and the storage room where I'd slept. Downsized to a condo in a less prestigious zip code. I'd heard all of this secondhand from Marcus and other family members who'd stayed in touch. I didn't follow my parents on social media, didn't check their updates, didn't keep tabs on their lives. But sometimes information found me anyway. "Your father's been telling people you destroyed his life," Marcus told me over dinner one night. "He's got this whole victim narrative going. His ungrateful daughter, his mother's manipulation, how he's been wronged." "Of course he does," I said. Taking responsibility would require self-awareness. "Does it bother you?" I thought about it. A year ago it would have, even 6 months ago, but now? I shook my head. Now I just feel distant from it. Like it's happening to someone else. "That's growth, kid." "Or trauma response," I said wryly. ¿Por qué no los dos? I laughed. Marcus had become the older brother I'd never had, the family connection I'd always wanted. He'd introduced me to the cousins I'd never known, to Grandma Rosa's entire side of the family that my father had cut off. I had aunts now, uncles, second cousins. I had people who called on my birthday and invited me to barbecues and actually wanted me around. The family I'd built was better than the family I'd been born into. At Thornton, I was thriving. My sophomore year GPA was even higher than my freshman year. I'd been elected to lead the investment club. I was dating David seriously now, and he'd started making noises about meeting the extended family, by which he meant Marcus and the cousins, the people who actually mattered. Are you nervous? I asked him. Terrified, he admitted. But in a good way, like, these are people who matter to you, so I want them to like me. They'll love you, I promised. And they did. The summer between sophomore and junior year, I brought David to a family reunion at the Connecticut estate. My estate now, though I could barely process that. 50 people showed up, all of them from Grandma Rosa's side, all of them eager to know the girl she'd loved so much. You look like her, one of the older cousins told me. Same eyes, same steel spine. She was extraordinary, I said. So are you, kid. I spent that summer in New York, working at Morrison Real Estate Holdings as an intern under the new CEO. She was brilliant and demanding and exactly what the company needed. Under her leadership, we'd already expanded into 2 new markets, and our stock price had climbed 30%. You have good instincts, she told me at the end of the summer. If you're interested in this industry long-term, you could do real damage. Good damage. I'm thinking about it, I admitted, but I want to finish my degree first, maybe get an MBA. Smart, take your time, build your knowledge base. The company will still be here. She smiled. Though between you and me, I think you could run this place one day. You've got your grandmother's vision and your grandfather's ruthlessness. That's a powerful combination. Junior year started with a bang. I was featured in a Thornton Alumni magazine article about students making an impact. Vanessa Morrison, heir to the Morrison fortune, is reimagining what it means to inherit wealth, the article said. Rather than coasting on her grandmother's legacy, she's building her own. The article mentioned my work at the company, my grades, my scholarship fund. It mentioned my difficult family background in vague terms. Morrison overcame significant personal challenges to achieve her success, without going into detail. It was the kind of profile that usually led to speaking invitations and networking opportunities. It also apparently led to my father seeing it and losing his mind all over again. He showed up at my apartment in November, somehow getting past the doorman. I came home from class to find him sitting in the hallway outside my door. We need to talk, he said. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 years. He looked older, grayer, diminished somehow. The confident CEO who'd ruled his household with silent disapproval had been replaced by someone who just looked tired. No, I said, we really don't. Vanessa, please. He stood up. I'm your father. Biologically, sure. I got my keys out. But that's where the connection ends. I know I wasn't perfect. Perfect? I laughed, harsh and bitter. You weren't even adequate. You weren't even present. I provided for you. You gave me a roof over my head and food to eat. Congratulations, you met the literal legal minimum for not being arrested for child neglect. I put my key in the lock. But you know what you never gave me? Love, attention, a single indication that you were happy I existed. That's not fair. Fair? I turned on him. You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about how you drove me to a train station and didn't call for 8 months. Let's talk about how I wasn't invited to Claire's engagement party or her wedding. Let's talk about how you stole my college fund to pay for Claire's luxury semester abroad. Let's talk about how you cut Grandma Rose out of my life because she had the audacity to point out that you were playing favorites. She turned you against me. She loved me, the words echoed in the hallway. She loved me and you couldn't stand it. You couldn't stand that someone in your family looked at me and saw value. So you cut her off and you tried to erase her, and when I found her again, you lost your mind because you couldn't control the narrative anymore. I'm sorry. He looked broken. I'm sorry, okay? I was wrong. I see that now, but you're my daughter, and I'm begging for another chance. I studied him, this man who'd given me half my DNA and nothing else. I tried to find sympathy in my heart, forgiveness, anything softer than the cold rage that had sustained me. I couldn't. You're not sorry you hurt me, I said quietly. You're sorry you lost your inheritance. You're sorry your life fell apart. You're sorry you have to face consequences for the first time in your entitled existence. But you're not actually sorry for treating me like garbage. That's not true. When's my birthday? He blinked. What? My birthday. When is it? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. It's in the spring? It's in January, January 12th. I just turned 20 last month. I smiled without humor. You don't even know when I was born. You were there, presumably, and you still can't remember the date. Vanessa, go home, Dad. Go back to Claire and Mom and your reduced circumstances. Build whatever life you can from the pieces you have left, but leave me out of it. Please. You left me at a train station. My voice was steady now, cold and clear. You left me there like luggage you didn't want to carry anymore. You don't get to come back now and play the loving father. That door closed the day you drove away without looking back. I went into my apartment and shut the door, locked it, leaned against it until I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall. Then I called David and I cried, and I let myself grieve for the father I'd never had and never would. Senior year came with its own challenges and triumphs. I was president of the investment club now, co-teaching a seminar on ethical wealth management. My thesis on sustainable urban development won departmental honors. I was accepted to Harvard Business School for my MBA, deferred for a year so I could work full-time at Morrison Real Estate Holdings first. David proposed in the spring by the lake on campus with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I know you've got your own fortune, he said, laughing and nervous. But I wanted you to have something from my family too, something that says we're in this together. I said yes through happy tears, and we celebrated with both our families, his biological one, my chosen one. Marcus gave a toast that made everyone cry. David's mother welcomed me with open arms. It was everything a family celebration should be. My parents weren't there. I hadn't invited them. I'd heard through the grapevine that Claire was divorced now. Bradley had gone to prison, and she'd gotten an annulment, and working as a receptionist at a dental office. Mom and Dad were still in their condo, still scraping by, still blaming me for their downfall. I felt a pang of something. Not quite guilt, not quite pity. Just a sort of distant sadness that they'd chosen this path and couldn't seem to find their way off it. But it wasn't my job to save them. It had never been my job to save them. Graduation was bittersweet. I walked across the stage to thunderous applause. I was valedictorian, another achievement my parents would never know about, and collected my diploma with Grandma Rose's pearls in my ears and her strength in my spine. The CEO of Morrison Real Estate Holdings was there, along with Marcus and the whole extended family. David's family filled a whole row. Even Richard Chen showed up, beaming with pride. Your grandmother would be so proud, he told me afterward. I hope so, I said. Trust me, she knew exactly what she was doing when she gave you everything. She knew you'd use it to build something beautiful. That summer, before starting my full-time position at the company, I did something I'd been planning for months. I went back to my hometown, to the neighborhood where I'd grown up, feeling invisible. The house where I'd spent my childhood had new owners now. I didn't go inside. I just stood across the street and looked at it, remembering the girl who'd lived there. The girl who'd thought she was the problem. The girl who'd tried so hard to be good enough. Hey, David said softly beside me. You okay? Yeah, I took his hand. Yeah, I really am. We drove past my old high school, past the train station where they'd left me, past all the landmarks of a life I'd survived and transcended, and then we drove back to New York, to the life I'd built, to the future I was creating. 5 years later, I stood in the conference room at Morrison Real Estate Holdings as the board voted me in as CEO. At 25, I was the youngest CEO in the company's history and the first woman. The company had tripled in value under my leadership as COO. We'd expanded into 6 new markets, pioneered sustainable development practices, and become an industry leader. The vote was unanimous. I called Marcus first. "Grandma Rose would be proud," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I wish she could see it," I said. "She can, kid. Wherever she is, she can." David took me out to celebrate that night. David, my husband of 3 years now, my partner in every sense of the word. We went to the restaurant where we'd had our first date, back when I was still figuring out who I was becoming. "To the CEO," he toasted. "The woman who built an empire from ashes." "I had help," I said. "Besides, you had a foundation, but you built the empire yourself." My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Congratulations on the CEO position. I always knew you'd do great things, but Dad." I stared at it for a long moment. 5 years of silence. And now this. A message that said, "Congratulations, but not I'm sorry." That said I always knew, but ignored the years when he'd acted like I'd never amount to anything. I blocked the number. "Family?" David asked gently. "Former family," I corrected, trying to get in on the success now that there's glory to share. "What are you going to do?" I thought about it. I thought about the girl I'd been, desperate for any crumb of affection from parents who couldn't be bothered. I thought about the woman I'd become, strong and successful and surrounded by people who actually loved me. "Nothing," I said. "I'm going to do absolutely nothing." "They made their choice 10 years ago. They don't get to change it now." David raised his glass again. "To the family we choose." "To the family we choose," I echoed. That weekend, I went to Connecticut, to the estate that was mine now, but would always be Grandma Rose's in my heart. Marcus and his family were there, along with a dozen other relatives. All of us gathered to celebrate the latest Morrison milestone. "Speech," someone called out. I stood up, glass in hand, looking at these people who'd embraced me when my own parents had thrown me away. "I don't have a speech prepared," I said. But I want to say thank you. Thank you for being the family I needed. Thank you for showing me what love actually looks like. And thank you to Grandma Rose, wherever she is, for giving me the tools to build the life I deserved." I raised my glass to second chances, to chosen family, and to building something beautiful from broken pieces. "To building something beautiful," they all echoed. Later, alone in Grandma Rose's study, my study now, I pulled out the letter she'd left me. I'd read it hundreds of times. Over the years, whenever I needed strength or guidance or just the reminder that I'd been loved. "Build something beautiful, my darling girl." I looked around the room, at the life I'd constructed piece by careful piece. The career I'd earned, the love I'd found, the family I'd chosen, the peace I'd fought for. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered. "I built something beautiful." And somewhere, I like to think, she was smiling. The ending came not with a bang, but with a whisper. A year later, I was pregnant with my first child, a daughter, according to the ultrasound. David and I were picking out nursery colors and arguing over names and building the kind of family we'd both dreamed of. The news inevitably reached my parents. They sent a card through Marcus, not trusting that I hadn't blocked their address too. "Congratulations on your pregnancy. We hope to meet our grandchild someday." Our grandchild. As if they had any right to claim her. I threw the card away without responding. "Do you ever regret it?" David asked me one night as we lay in bed, his hand on my growing belly. "Cutting them off completely?" "No," I said, and I meant it. I regret that I had to. I regret that they didn't love me enough to be better. But I don't regret protecting myself. And I definitely don't regret protecting our daughter from people who would make her feel the way they made me feel. Fair enough? Our daughter was born on a Tuesday in March, healthy and perfect, and loved from her first breath. We named her Rose after the woman who'd saved me. Rose Vanessa, giving her my name as her middle, a reminder that she came from strength. I held her in the hospital, this tiny, perfect thing, and I made her a promise. You will never doubt that you are wanted. You will never wonder if you are loved. You will never feel invisible or less than, or like you have to earn your place in this family. You are ours and we are yours, and that's forever. David kissed my forehead. She's lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other. The family came to visit. Marcus and his kids, David's parents and sister, all the cousins and aunts and uncles from Grandma Rose's side. The hospital room was filled with flowers and balloons and love. My parents didn't come. I hadn't told them which hospital, hadn't given them any information at all. They existed now only as characters in a story I sometimes told, a cautionary tale about what not to do, about how cruelty compounds and neglect leaves scars. But they didn't get to be part of this joy. They'd forfeited that right years ago at a train station when they'd driven away and never looked back. Sometimes in quiet moments, I wondered about them. If they understood yet what they'd lost, if they'd ever taken responsibility for their choices, if Claire had ever apologized for her complicity in my erasure. But mostly, I didn't think about them at all. I was too busy living the life I'd built, running a company, raising a daughter, loving a man who loved me back, being part of a family that actually functioned. The happy ending I'd fought for, survived for, rebuilt my entire existence for. They'd left me at a train station expecting me to disappear into a life of mediocrity and silence. Instead, I'd built an empire. And I'd never told them where I went because they'd never bothered to ask. That was their loss, their failure, their regret to carry. I was too busy being happy to care.